It's a tremendous honor to be here. Amazing. My work is food, as Mike said, and food is a world in which things have gone sadly and dramatically awry. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some opportunities we have to fix this. It's not obvious from the food media, but most Americans don't care which type of salt they use, or whether their tomato is heirloom, or whether their beef is grass-fed. Most people, in fact, choose quantity and convenience over quality. This has led to obesity. The two-tier system, artisanal Parmesan for some and Kraft cheese singles for most, is no good. We have to find a way to provide decent food for everyone. We have to find a process that teaches us how to buy it, cook it, eat it, appreciate it. To promote carrots over Cheetos, as it were, and beans and rice over burgers and fries. Everyone knows that the alternative is disastrous. A third of America is obese, another third is overweight, and this isn't a fat person joke. Obesity-related diseases are responsible for at least 100,000 deaths in the United States each year, and perhaps as many as 300,000. At the current rate of growth, almost everyone will be obese or overweight by 2050. At the current rate of growth, obesity will kill more people in America each year than lung cancer by 2020. Ironically, it's lung cancer and the anti-tobacco campaigns it spawned that gives us a compelling model. There are tens of millions fewer smokers than there used to be in the United States, or than there would have been without anti-smoking campaigns. If we were only that successful in cutting obesity, we'd save tens of millions of lives in America alone in the 21st century. Cigarettes, as you know, are a nicotine delivery system. There's a sugar delivery system, too, one that's legally marketed and sold without restriction to children in schools and stores, on street corners. It's even given to them by their parents. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you a public health menace that contributes to more death than AIDS, the flu, murder, or even car accidents. Soda. Let's discuss what soda and cigarettes have in common. One, they're both harmful and wasteful. They're worse than useless. Neither provides any benefit beyond corporate profit and the satisfaction of an engineered craving driven by marketing and sometimes addiction. Two, because of this, their sales necessarily depend on marketing budgets in the hundreds of millions. Three, they're profitable. Coke made $6 billion in 2008. Philip Morris made $7 billion. Four, these profits are borne by taxpayers, by us, not only because we're the suckers buying these poisons, but because we subsidize the crops that produce them, and we pay for the enormous cost of public health and the environment. Finally, five, for the good of all, they're regulated by laws designed to decrease their consumption. Thanks. Well, actually, five isn't true. Soda is as unregulated as cigarettes were a generation ago. A tall 5-year-old can stick $1 in a Coke machine and receive a jolt of caffeine and sugar, the rough equivalent of a coffee, with 9 teaspoons of sugar. And if that were a 20-ounce Coke, it would be 17 teaspoons of sugar. The annual consumption of soda has gone from a few bottles per person per year when the crown cap, the bottle cap, was invented a little over 100 years ago, to 200 bottles a year per person in the 50s, to 600 per person now. At some point in the 80s, soft drinks became more popular than water. And these numbers don't include uncarbonated liquid candy like Gatorade, or the unspeakably cynical drinks like vitamin water. Can you believe that? Which contains a third as much sugar as Coke. Add these together, you have a quart of sweetened beverages per person per day. A quart. This quart contains about 300 calories. Not coincidentally, between 1975 and 1997, the per capita consumption of high fructose corn syrup, which is the sweetener most often used in soda now, went from virtually 0 to 60 pounds a year. That's equal to about 200 calories per person per day. We're at the point where Americans would have to eat 500 fewer calories each day to return to the average weight of the 70s, because our weight has increased 20% since then. American children get half their calories from fat and sugar, and their obesity rate has more than doubled in the last 20 years. For adolescents, it's more than tripled. Adult-onset diabetes can't even be called adult-onset diabetes anymore because too many kids have it. And a quarter of obese kids have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or other signs of heart disease. Half the food eaten in the US is now either takeout food or restaurant food, and that doesn't tell the story. Because if you go to the supermarket and you buy a bag of chips, a couple cans of Coke, frozen pizza, chocolate cake, you take that home, you put the pizza in the oven, you warm up you eat the chips, you drink. That's food eaten at home. The real guess is that perhaps 10% of all food is cooked from scratch in the United States now. And the real guess is that fewer than 5% of our calories come from unprocessed fruits and vegetables. Non-nutritive junk foods, we've taken to calling them UFOs, or unidentifiable food-like objects. Beautiful slide, no? Are around every corner. The fact that we're hardwired to eat fat, sugar, and salt, and that today food is fattier, sweeter, and saltier than ever before, is a deadly combination, especially with the world's biggest marketing budget behind it. And like so many American cultural experiences, this one's being exported to the point where, for the first time in history, overnutrition is killing just about as many people as undernutrition. Through lobbying and payoffs that maintain subsidies, through a willful ignorance of true costs, junk food's cheap. You can buy 5 double cheeseburgers for $5, but even a McDonald's sandwich, even a McDonald's salad costs $3.50. But the true price of a cheeseburger is at least $10, and there are credible estimates that peg it at $200. Think about it. Cattle feed is subsidized by taxpayers, and it takes a minimum of 100 gallons of water and 300 pounds of topsoil to produce a single burger. If a cow is raised in a rainforest, it takes about 50 square feet of clearance per burger. You can't put a price on environmental damage or on animal suffering. And many experts think that there's as much as 1 cubic meter of unknown biodiversity destroyed for each burger. How do you figure what that's worth? We can figure the cost of diet-related diseases. It's about $840 billion, which, by the way, is way more than Social Security. 40 years ago, savvy public health officials tried to tell people they were eating too much and badly. But when they wanted to say, eat less meat, the industry lobbied for a message like, choose lean meat. When they wanted to say, eat less fat, the industry got them to say, choose foods lower in fat. Both of these subtly different messages translate as eat different, but more. What happened? We gained weight. Yet the key to a sound diet is not only well known, but obvious. It's called eating real food, food that you prepare yourself or even, God forbid, cook. But big food can't make as much money on a carrot as it can on carrot cake. So we've been trained to uncook. We spend 20 times as much money in restaurants as we used to. We don't teach our kids how to cook. And our mantra has become, I'm too busy to cook. But we're busy in part because we spend 40 hours a week watching television, and increasingly, and most ironically, we're watching others cook. Much of this is well known. So why pick on soda? Why not UFOs in general? They're almost all equally guilty, after all. And here's why. Because we have to start somewhere, and soda is low-hanging fruit. Worthless, as I said. A major cause of obesity, and obesity, as I've said, is to diabetes what tobacco is to lung cancer. Because one study has shown that high fructose corn syrup contains a compound that may directly cause diabetes. And others have shown that calories in liquid form may not make you full, so they're easier to consume thoughtlessly. I want to continue by looking very briefly at the tobacco wars. The correlation between cancer and smoking was first discovered in the 30s. And 20 years later, Reader's Digest, yes, that Reader's Digest, published a groundbreaking story called Cancer by the Carton. Soon thereafter, the US Public Health Service announced the causal relationship between smoking and lung cancer, and by 1964, the Surgeon General said that smokers had a 70% higher mortality rate than non-smokers. What did the industry do? The industry covered up and diversified. You'll remember that R.J. Reynolds became R.J.R. Nabisco, which ought to tell you something about the food industry. They invested in marketing filter cigarettes for a healthier smoke, and they outspent public health messages $4,000 to 1. They paid professional liars to deny the truth. But the death of hundreds of thousands of smokers and non-smokers each year was too much to take, and we know the results. Packages were branded with warnings, and advertising was banned. In the 1998 settlement, tobacco companies, in exchange for exemption from individual liability cases, agreed to curtail marketing practices and pay about $10 billion a year to compensate states for medical care and to fund anti-smoking campaigns. It's not perfect, and it's not over. Worldwide, people smoke 6 trillion cigarettes each year. Still, half of all Americans who once smoked have stopped, and our smoking rates are about half of what they once were. And furthermore, the anti-smoking movement has built a self-perpetuating campaign that's growing stronger as developing countries recognize this. Lifestyle diseases are now a greater threat than communicable ones. Think about that one. You don't need to smoke, of course, and as Big Food likes to point out, you do need to eat. But you don't need sweetened beverages. Tobacco's addictive, but then so again are caffeinated drinks, and even modern fatty, salty, sweet UFOs are increasingly considered habit-forming. It's worth mentioning once again that once developed, diabetes never goes away. And if I say to you that there's an industry that hires experts to back up its specious claims, maintains that it isn't marketing to children when it is, endorses bad science, funds front groups, lobbies like mad, and claims that its new products are safer and better, and then I ask you, is that tobacco or Big Food? The answer is both. Big Food says that it understands there's a problem, and it wants to help. It wants to tackle this problem by creating smaller portion sizes, reducing fat and sugar content, downplaying marketing in schools, and reducing world hunger, by which they mean exporting Coke and Fruit Loops. These efforts are at least better than their self-responsibility campaigns, which maintain that if you simply drink less soda, why then you'll be drinking less soda, but in the meantime, we're going to try to get you to drink more soda, and if you do and you get sick, tough luck. To me, this sounds a little bit like someone holding you underwater while they're telling you to swim to the surface. Big Food claims that they're improving the nutritional quality of foods advertised to children. This is my favorite, too. My dad bought that last week. Big Food claims they're improving the nutritional quality of foods advertised to children, but the worst products remain the most heavily marketed. And their healthy food often involves sticking a chemical nutrient in otherwise nutrient-poor food. Healthy processed food, of course, is an oxymoron. If you have to label something healthy, it isn't. I want to tell you about a failed self-regulation effort that turned into a huge victory for the anti-junk food movement. This was the Smart Choices campaign of last fall. Smart Choices, which we call dumb choices. Smart Choices used a green check mark on the front of packages, ostensibly to show consumers which foods met USDA nutritional requirements. The fact that these smart choices included Fruit Loops and Kool-Aid didn't seem inconsistent to the industry or other members of the impartial panel of experts choosing them. But the program was immediately and widely damned. And soon enough, our reborn FDA got involved. Boom. 2 weeks later, it was dead. Dead. This signaled the start of something big, and we have both the will and the power to move forward. We also have some tools that not everyone knows about. For starters, the little-known Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976 authorizes regulatory action on substances if there's, quote, an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment, unquote. Tobacco was excluded. Fabulous lobbying move there, but junk food was not. And since its harm outweighs its benefit, it can be considered toxic. When we demonized tobacco, when we got 6-year-olds to say, "Mommy, Daddy, please don't smoke. I don't want you to die." It's my best 6-year-old imitation. We changed the way many people think about smoking. Soda and other junk must be similarly demonized, and big food must be held responsible for its unethical marketing to children who obviously don't have the adult capacity to resist, who are developing habits that are going to last a lifetime, and who spend nearly $30 billion of their own money on junk food. Increasingly, there's pressure to reduce and counter that industry marketing. Worldwide, there's loads of activity, but the US has to lead the way in this fight. So these, I think, are the initial and immediate goals. 1, reduce, then eliminate the marketing of junk food to kids. In fact, counter it, because Madison Avenue helped create this problem. Madison Avenue can help fix it. 2, remove vending machines from schools and allow fewer vending machines elsewhere. Or here's a novel idea: use vending machines to dispense real food. 3, stop sponsorship of sports or other school activities by junk food. And 4, let's take a step backward. Let's make sure there's free water everywhere. We also have to look at labeling. The simplest solution is what's called traffic light labeling, which is being widely used in the UK and considered by the FDA. This should be accompanied by the removal of all health claims from packaging and improved nutritional labeling. That's what this should look like. The school lunch program must be overhauled, and with the Childhood Nutrition Act coming up for renewal, now's the time. And I want to say this: let's tone down the from-the-garden local and organic food for lunch business. It's all very nice, but what we need now is an all-out attack on junk food, and that can only be done by mandating menus that meet strict nutritional standards. We also need incentives for grown-ups to eat better and disincentives for them to eat worse. Let's give tax breaks to retailers who sell real food in so-called food deserts, and tax breaks to people who purchase real foods. Let's tax UFOs, by which I mean almost all highly processed foods. Let's make chocolate chip cookies cost $2 and apples 25 cents. Let's make Coke $4 while we're making water free. Let's give people a break on their health care premiums if they eat right, as we do for not smoking and even for safe driving. Let's employ professional cooks to help those who are truly unable to cook for themselves, whether because they're disabled or working 2 low-paying jobs to support their families. Let's give low-income families basic cooking equipment, cheap or free. Let's subsidize farmers markets, double the value of food stamps at farmers markets, revive farmers markets that are in the cities, and encourage direct sale by farmers, fishermen, even hunters. Let's subsidize traditional rather than industrial farming. This sounds expensive, but the payoffs of all of this would be incredible when we start paying for it with the soda tax. The estimate is that a soda tax of a penny per ounce would reduce consumption by up to 15%, raise $15 billion a year, and then quickly reduce public health costs by $5 billion a year. And don't think this is a fantasy. Yeah, it's good. Don't think this is a fantasy. The soda tax is being considered in states all over the country, even so-called conservative states. The president's discussed it, it's been introduced in Congress. Once a soda tax is enacted in a few states, the momentum is going to be unstoppable. And because the long-term goal is hardly a Big Mac, large fries, and a bottle of water, we can go further and develop a cheeseburger tax, and we can do so fairly. The Rayner scale, developed in Britain, approaches objectivity in weighing a food's benefits against its risk. I say approaches because it makes camembert appear to be a bad food, so it's obviously imperfect, but it's a start. A 10% tax on so-called red light food could raise hundreds of billions of dollars annually while discouraging the consumption of bad food and encouraging the consumption, and I might say production, of good. Everything changes. I've long said that if you were to get 90% of your calories from unprocessed fruits and vegetables, the remaining 10% could be Coke and Snickers, and you'd be fine. But as I mentioned earlier, we had 5% of our calories from plants, largely because there are so many heavily marketed and seemingly more convenient choices that many people simply can't choose foods that are good for their personal and our collective health. Big Food claims to stand for choice, and choice, of course, is all American. But in an arena where most choices are destructive, we need fewer, not more. And for every one of us saying, eat plants, not junk, there are hundreds of millions of dollars screaming, have it your way. The government must counterbalance industry to help people choose better. The representatives of the food industry who recognize this, that this is going to happen, can profit by it. It's not predetermined that big food continue down the same road as tobacco. They can diversify into food that sustains health in the earth. By not doing so, they run the risk of becoming not only increasingly regulated, but even more widely reviled than they are now. What can we do? Those of us who work on food issues have spent a great deal of time discussing, for example, whether grass-fed beef is environmentally less destructive than farm-raised fish, or whether it's possible to eat more food that's grown locally. And these are great issues. These are important issues. But right now, our main job, our critical job, is to get people choosing carrots instead of Cheetos, to get people cooking, and to get people to eat in a way that was once taken for granted, sanely. Thank you.